It's time for another episode of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we sit on the edge of the first election or caucus. First of all, maybe you can explain the difference between a primary election and a caucus.
Well, Mike, most people here in California are used to a primary where you go and you vote. In California, for president, you have to register by party, and you can only vote in that party's primary. For other offices, you can vote for Democrats or Republicans in the primary based on your personal choice. And then the top two will go on to the fall election. It doesn't work that way in our presidential primary. That's why it's in March, and you have to be in a party.
Right.
But in a caucus, you don't go to a poll and vote. You go to a high school auditorium or gym, and you caucus. You literally stand in a group of people who are for your candidate, and I think they submit a paper ballot in the caucus, and then they add up the caucus ballots in the hall of the people standing in the hall, and that is the winner of the caucus based on all of those dozens or hundreds of meetings held all over the state in high school gymnasiums or churches or wherever or sometimes people's houses, wherever they have them throughout the state. And they get called in, and that's how you determine the winner. So unlike a primary, and particularly here in California where you can vote by mail and vote 2 weeks or so before the election and not have to get out of your house on election day, there you've got to get out in the snow and go someplace and stand around for a couple hours with people you don't know, and you have to be sort of committed to it.
So we've got bad weather in Iowa, which could play a factor, right?
Yeah, this is going to be the coldest Iowa caucus in history. So if you think about the logistics of this, you've got to get out of your house on the coldest night of the year and drive, if you live in a rural part of the state, sometimes 30 or 40 miles to get to the caucus location, and then figure out how you're going to get home safely in what could be a blizzard or icy condition after the caucus is over. Now, who does this help? Some people would say, well, Trump's voters are more committed, so they're going to come out come hell, high water or freezing temperatures. Others say Trump's voters are more rural, so they've got a bigger challenge than maybe a Haley or a DeSantis voter who lives in the cities and the suburbs where it's easier to get to the caucus location, easier to get home, doesn't take as much distance. So we don't know is the answer, but when it's all said and done, weather is going to be a factor one way or the other that could have a very meaningful impact in the caucus results.
Now, how is a caucus a true sampling of any kind? We're looking at middle America. We're looking at just a sampling of people in Iowa. Why is it so important to the candidates?
Well, it's important because it's first and because it provides a impetus of momentum going forward. Now, it's not, frankly, very historically predictive of the ultimate winner, but it provides the initial momentum. We've all been talking about elections now for the better part of a year, and this is the first one. And so the entire nation and indeed the world's attention gets focused on it. And in Iowa, we talked about this concept before, retail politics.
Right. Candidates
have been going to small towns in Iowa. DeSantis is very proud of visiting all 99 counties and pressing the flesh in coffee shops and barber shops and in person in people's living rooms now for a year. And so Iowa voters, unlike most voters, unlike California voters, for example, have had a personal experience with most of these candidates. Some of them have had a personal experience on multiple occasions. And so they get to really sort of know them and form an opinion. And that makes them perhaps, I don't want to say the most knowledgeable voters ever, because I don't think there's any evidence of that, but certainly the most familiar voters with the candidates that they're caucusing for. And caucusing requires a commitment. I mean, you have to actually get up and spend a couple hours and do something. Is it representative? No. Is it informed? Yes, I think they probably are informed. It's the kind of thing that goes either way. It's all about motivation. It's all about getting up and going out. It's all about how impacting the weather's going to be to your ability to do that or your desire to do that. And it's all about who has had the best ground game to motivate their people to get out.
Now, you talk about the ground game and the retail politics. Trump hasn't participated in any of that.
No. Now, it's said that Trump has got a better organized campaign than he did the last time, which I think means that he's got people who are trying to control the message, although whenever he picks up his phone to tweet, all bets are off. So we'll see. He's got a strong group of people there. Are they better organized than DeSantis in terms of getting them out, or Haley? That remains to be seen, and it may not be the case.
So here we are pontificating about this thing. Is it a slam dunk for Trump, no matter what we sit here and talk about?
Well, it depends on how you're going to define victory. So let me just share with you one of the polls that's out today. It has Trump at 53, Haley at 17, DeSantis at 15.5. That means that Haley has now passed DeSantis, is into second place. There are other polls that basically have Trump between 52 and 55%. So here is sort of the definition of victory. A week ago, everybody would have said that Trump is going to run away with the state, and he's still undoubtedly going to win. But if he wins with a margin of 50% or less, that will be deemed not a victory. He will have been in first place, but he will have underperformed expectations. If Haley finishes in second place, and she is now consistently polling in second place, passing DeSantis, most people think that means DeSantis is going to drop out because DeSantis is running in fifth place in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And his campaign will have been $150 million pretty much flushed down the toilet. What he does, where his supporters go, that's going to be a big question. But if Haley is in second place and Trump is below 50%, who's going to win New Hampshire? Does Trump have clay feet, and are they now collapsing? As you recall, Mike, I speculated a long time ago that there was a scenario under which Trump was not going to be the Republican nominee. And we were at the point where, and I will be the first to admit, it's a draw to an inside straight strategy. But nonetheless, we're holding three of the cards now. So if Trump is below 50%, if Haley is in second place, they're going to New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, the poll this week has Haley behind Trump by only 7 points. Mm. And with Christie pulling out, if you add Christie's support in New Hampshire to Haley's, she overtakes Trump. New Hampshire is a state where independents and Democrats, in fact, can vote in the Republican primary, and the Democrats really aren't having a primary because Biden refused to put Iowa and New Hampshire ahead of South Carolina. You could have Haley come out of New Hampshire in first place, going into South Carolina, her home state. And if that's the case, the news is going to be Trump is falling apart. Now, Super Tuesday in March, I guess 4th or 5th, where you have a lot of states, a lot of them winner-take-all states. That's sort of been the Trump firewall. But if he is in free fall going into Super Tuesday, all bets are off. So that is a scenario under which somebody not named Trump becomes the Republican nominee. And yes, we're drawn to an inside straight, but the cards are beginning to turn.
That's amazing analysis, Keith. Thank you so much for that. You did mention that Christie dropped out and the factor that plays, but does it play a major factor in all of this, or is he never had any numbers anyway?
Christie had 11.5% in New Hampshire. If those numbers go to Haley, Haley wins New Hampshire, and if Haley wins New Hampshire, she's got momentum going into South Carolina. I mean, it's like donating a kidney. It was his sacrifice for the campaign, but it might be the one at the right time that does the right job.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. Okay. So we look ahead, I guess, to Super Tuesday as the real test, right?
Well, we'll see. Yes, exactly. Because there, how does Trump spend his money? And remember, on Super Tuesday, Trump is supposed to be in a courtroom in Washington facing trial for felonies. So what's going to happen there? By the time we get to Super Tuesday, the verdict will be returned in his civil trial in New York. And we'll know how many hundreds of millions of dollars the court is going to order him to pay and to get out of business in New York, which will sort of put a hammer to his reputation as a successful businessman.
Right.
The E. Jean Carroll trial for sexual assault, for his libeling of her, the second trial, he's already been found liable once, is due to begin. And I expect we're going to have a verdict on his claim of immunity. And I expect, based on the arguments in the court last week, that claim is going to be forcefully rejected by the court. So all of that is going to happen right on top of Super Tuesday.
Right.
So we're going to have just an amazing juxtaposition of events leading into that campaign. It's going to be like nothing I think we've ever seen before to produce a result that really can't be predicted. but it does open the door to somebody other than Trump.
Gotcha. Now, the E.G. Carroll case and the financial case in New York are cases that are important and they're valid, but they don't really affect American people directly. Whereas the other trials are technically against the American people. The fact that those first two trials don't really mean that much, will that play any factor in it at all?
Well, for those who think there's nothing wrong with having a legally adjudicated sexual predator or business fraud as a president, probably not. And there is, unfortunately, now way too many people in America for whom those issues apparently don't count. But they will count for some. And they really sort of take the tarnish off the image of here is this successful businessman.
Gotcha.
And here is this, great moral paragon that evangelicals have been rallying around. I think that makes that a lot more uncomfortable for those people who support him. And it just begins a cavalcade of losing court situations. I think the court is going to be very forceful in rejecting his immunity plea based on his argument that he could, order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his opponent and get away with it. I wonder if Joe Biden was, by the way, taking notes on that. It's going to be a rocky couple of weeks for him in court right up on the eve of Super Tuesday.
But there doesn't seem to be anything he says or does that seems to affect his base. So it's fun to watch, entertaining, but it doesn't seem to affect anything.
Well, we think that's the case. And now we have actual elections where we're going to find out empirically if that's the case. It's an inside straight, but
yeah. All right, let's cover briefly, very briefly. You've done such a great job at this. I want to stop right now. We've talked a little bit about Trump's cases, and I think that's you summed that up pretty well. Now, what's going on in Congress? We got a complete clown show going on, as you have always predicted. There's stunts going on from both sides. We got Hunter Biden showing up at a committee meeting unannounced. And then as you put them, the Keystone Cops just went berserk. Any thoughts on all of that craziness, or is it just something we can be entertained with?
Well, it's unfortunate for the country. It's unfortunate for the world because tied up in this is aid for Israel. It's aid for Ukraine. It's keeping our soldiers paid. It's getting all of the country's bills paid. It's modernizing the military at a time when we're facing very significant international challenges, and we need to be making these investments. There is a group of Republicans in Congress who just simply do not understand how government works, do not understand that if you have a 2-vote majority in one house, you can't drive the train, and who are putting Johnson in a completely unreasonable position. And Johnson, I think, is realizing that. He announces this morning that the top line, at least the budget ceiling, is going to get adopted, which will allow them to move forward and keep the government running. Right. Although how that gets to the floor mechanically is still to be determined. So we've got a real mess. For the Republicans who are doing this, all it's going to do is it's going to make voters in November want to send a definitive different group of people to stop the nonsense. And the faster that the Republican caucus figures that out, and I think most of them already know it, it's a small group that don't, but the faster that they begin to act like that, the better the odds are that the Republicans are going to maintain the majority, which is, as we speak today, 2 votes.
Yeah, and there's rumblings even, and it's just rumblings at this point that they're going to target Johnson again and throw him out. So we'll see what happens with that, right?
Stupid is as stupid does.
Well, I guess we'll meet again next week. We'll have a lot more information after Iowa, I would assume, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more. The Trump stuff will continue, and it's almost secondary at this point what goes on in those courtrooms, although you point out that you feel that it still could be that inside straight. It could play to that inside straight. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. And we'll keep an eye on the Congress, going after someone that isn't even in government, has no effect on the United States in terms of policies and real issues, budgets and all of that, as you also mentioned. So we'll see what happens.
We will. It's going to be strap in. It'll be an exciting couple of weeks.
All right. Well, thanks, Keith. We'll be back again next week for another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.